A very good evening from Edinburgh, from the home of the Scottish Parliament, which for the past 8 years has been dominated by the powerful figure of the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Her sudden announcement today that she is to step down, both as leader of the SNP and as First Minister, will change the political landscape here in Scotland and will no doubt have a wider impact on the politics of the United Kingdom. Ms Sturgeon insisted that her decision was not related to any current controversies and that she'd been considering her future for some time. She said that after a record period as First Minister, the job had taken its toll. Well, in recent months, Ms Sturgeon has seen her controversial gender reforms blocked by Westminster and her plans to hold an independence referendum blocked by the UK Supreme Court. Well, in tonight's programme, we'll be looking at the Sturgeon legacy and the reaction to her resignation, but we'll start with the announcement that very few had predicted. Here's our Scotland editor, James Cook.
No one has done the job longer. No other woman has done it at all.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming along. Being First Minister of Scotland.
But Nicola Sturgeon says the job description of First Minister includes knowing when to call it a day.
In my head and in my heart, I know that time is now. That it is right for me, for my party, and for the country. And so today I am announcing my intention to step down as First Minister and leader of my party. Individual polls come and go, but I am firmly of the view that there is now majority support for independence in Scotland. But that support needs to be solidified, and it needs to grow further if our independent Scotland is to have the best possible foundation. To achieve that, we must reach across the divide in Scottish politics.
The divide is cultural as well as constitutional. The case of the double rapist Isla Bryson posing particular problems for the First Minister and highlighting concerns about her attempts to make it easier to legally change gender. There are also splits in the SNP about Ms Sturgeon's desire to turn the next general election into a referendum on independence in all but name.
By making my decision clear now, I free the SNP to choose the path it believes to be the right one, without worrying about the perceived implications for my leadership, and in the knowledge that a new leader will steer us, I believe, successfully on that path.
First Minister, I think it's fair to say that the NHS is in a really serious situation. The attainment gap between rich and poor pupils, which you'd said was one of your core missions as First Minister, remains pretty wide. And despite what you're saying today, polls suggest that you've got nowhere near creating a sustained majority for independence. Do you have regrets about one or any of those issues?
Oh, again, James, I'm a human being. I don't know if you've got regrets about things in your life. Of course, I've got regrets about all sorts of things in my life. And as I reflect on my time as First Minister, there'll be things I am hugely proud of and things that I regret. And if I had my time again, I might do differently. And forgive me, there'll be plenty of time for me to do that. There'll, I'm sure, be plenty of time for you to do that. And I'm sure you will.
Nicola Sturgeon is not leaving office here at Bute House because she faces imminent electoral defeat. Far from it. Her party is still way ahead in the polls, and although she divides opinion, there is a lot of support for her. No, it seems she is going out of a combination of frustration and fatigue.
And through the toughest...
And while she's been here, there have been 5 UK Prime Ministers. Rishi Sunak, the one to land in that awkward position of praising his opponent.
Well, let me first start by paying tribute to Nicola Sturgeon for her long-standing public service, and I wish her well in the future. Now, obviously, Nicola and I didn't agree on everything, but in the short time that we did work together, I was pleased that we were able to announce 2 free ports in Scotland.
Paying his tribute, Scottish Labour's leader recalled tussles of old.
I first met Nicola Sturgeon when I was 12 years old because she was standing in an election against my father. And there's been lots of disagreements, lots of arguments, lots of back and forth. But one thing you can't doubt is this is someone that is an able politician. It's someone who has been, as I say, in politics for 20 years. And that level of service is, of course, worthy of respect and thanks.
Alex Salmond is now a political opponent too, mentor turned tormentor.
I'm not certain that this is going to be a bad thing at all. I mean, there's talent within the SNP. I think the key litmus test is going to be whether the next leader sees the opportunity to redefine the strategy for independence, to broaden the base of the independence campaign, and starts articulating the fundamental case for Scottish self-determination.
So, Nicola Sturgeon's sudden departure creates a moment of uncertainty for the SNP, for Scotland, and also for the future of the UK itself.
And James is with me now to talk a little more about the events of the day. Why now? Did the decision take everyone by surprise, as people are saying?
I think that's a very good question, Hugh. I mean, it did come, relatively speaking, out of the blue. It's something of a shock, but it's not a complete surprise because the pressure had been mounting on Nicola Sturgeon. There was no immediate existential threat that was going to push her out of office, but she was under a lot of pressure from a whole variety of corners for a whole variety of issues. We heard about some of them there in terms of the National Health Service, in terms of education, in terms of, most of all this year, gender. So there are a lot of issues for her there. And then there's also the question about whether she was running out of road towards independence, particularly in trying to advance this idea of turning this next general election into a de facto referendum, as it's called, on independence. That had caused considerable disquiet within the party. And I think what we heard from her there, saying that actually this frees up the party to perhaps, she didn't quite say it, but perhaps to amend that decision without affecting her or being concerned about her leadership, I think had something to do with it. I also think it would be a mistake to understate the effect COVID had on her psychologically. She talks about it a lot, and I think it opened her eyes to the possibility of a world outside politics where some things may even matter more.
Well, James, we'll talk a little more later about maybe the legacy and some of those who might be wanting to succeed. But for now, thanks very much. James Cook there, our Scotland editor. Well, as James was saying, the challenges facing the incoming First Minister, whoever that is, are considerable. The Scottish Government is responsible for major areas of domestic policy, including health and education. And of course, the state of the NHS in Scotland, we've reported on it, is a cause of deep concern to many, as it is across the UK in many parts. Public sector workers, of course, also wanting more pay. That position is challenging as well, as it is in England. Now, Nicola Sturgeon's supporters point to her undisputed record of success in 5 elections to Holyrood and to Westminster. They say that can't be disputed. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon has been to Greenock to talk to people about their response to the resignation.
Greenock in Inverclyde. On its quiet high street, the news and noise surrounding Nicola Sturgeon's resignation has been filtering through.
I'm sad, I nearly cried.
Really?
Yes.
Big deal then, Nicola Sturgeon going for you?
Yes, it is. Yep, but you've got to move on.
Popular among some, others glad she is going.
I just think it's time she resigned anyway. She needed to resign.
Why?
So I don't know. I just don't. She's not done anything for Scotland.
Scotland voted against independence in 2014. This area, though, was almost evenly divided amongst those voting yes and no. Those divisions still evident amongst diners in this local cafe. Celebrating or commiserating?
We'll be commiserating. I think it's a sad loss to politics. I don't think anybody can touch her as far as politician is concerned. She's sharp as a tack.
I'm ex-NHS, and I think since the SFP came in, and particularly Nicola, health services slid down the hill in Scotland.
So what do you make of her resigning?
I actually quite agree with her going. I think she's come to the end of her road.
Parts of Greenock have high levels of deprivation. The work Nicola Sturgeon's government has done to tackle this appreciated by many here, although some do have doubts about more recent decisions she has made.
Free bus passes for over 60. The school kids all get bus passes, so that helps them get to school in the dark mornings.
Do you feel like she's had areas where she's been less sure-footed?
Well, with the transgender, yeah, I didn't agree with that.
Well, you're in the most socially deprived area in Scotland. So I suppose the SNP policies that she's driven and kind of led have helped this area.
Like
what? The child payments, the baby boxes, anything that's kind of helped kind of promote and improve child poverty is help in this area. So yeah, I think she's been a big advocate for that.
For years, Nicola Sturgeon has been the most recognisable figure in Scottish politics. As she steps down from leading, though not from politics altogether, the race to the top to succeed her will now get underway. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Greenock.
Well, there's no question, of course, Nicola Sturgeon has been all-powerful in the world of Scottish politics for over 8 years, but her political journey started during her teenage years as a believer in independence for Scotland and as a committed member of the Scottish National Party. In her statement today, she did acknowledge, as we've heard, that dealing with the COVID pandemic had been the most challenging period that she'd known. Some of her own party colleagues have been highly critical of her approach to the question of another referendum on independence. BBC Scotland's Martin Geisler looks now at Nicola Sturgeon's legacy.
It's a journey which began on the doorsteps of Ayrshire and took her to the highest office in the land. When a teenage Nicola Sturgeon was delivering their leaflets in the 80s, the SNP were a fringe party. Neither she nor they could have imagined what lay ahead.
Nicola Sturgeon!
The first years of her leadership must have felt like a dream. Shy by nature, she was filling arenas and strutting the stage like a rock star. Scottish politics had never seen the likes.
It is now a significant force in British politics, not only in Scottish politics, and indeed, if the next UK election produces a hung parliament, the SNP's presence at Westminster might yet prove to be a crucial form of leverage for securing another referendum.
But the good times didn't last long. Alex Salmon, Sturgeon's mentor, was cleared of a series of sex charges in court. The case caused a rift between the pair that would never heal. There were struggles on policy too, on health, education and on the economy. It's argued Scotland's worse off now than when she took over. And recent controversial policies on gender reform, most particularly, prompted claims she'd either lost touch with or stopped caring about the public mood.
There's all of that, all those problems and more. And yet, half of Scotland, give or take, is still foursquare behind Nicola Sturgeon and her vision of an independent future. The problem is that needle's not shifting, not really. And the polls suggest she will struggle to get her lifelong ambition across the line.
Give it every ounce of energy.
So she's decided it's somebody else's battle now, but she promised today she'll stay in the fight, right behind them.
I firmly believe that my successor, whoever he or she may be, will lead Scotland to independence, and I'll be there cheering him or her on every single step of the way.
Even Nicola Sturgeon's enemies admire her strengths. A tireless worker and a great communicator, she still has approval ratings any leader, anywhere, would envy.
I probably had more disagreements with Nicola Sturgeon, or certainly more public ones than anybody else. I still disagree with Nicola Sturgeon on everything, but it doesn't mean that I haven't, got enough appreciation of the effort level that's been put in to say that I wish her well in what happens next.
And so the show's over. Scotland's leading lady, rock star to some, villain to others, is leaving the stage and her own indelible mark on the country. Martin Geisler, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Well, let's have a word then with our political editor, Chris Mason. We've talked a little bit about the impact here in Scotland, which clearly is significant, Chris, but there's a much wider impact too, isn't there?
There really is, because Nicola Sturgeon's a huge figure clearly in Scottish politics, but the SNP on her watch have become a big political player around the UK. Just look at her longevity. She has been First Minister for longer than either the Prime Minister or the Labour leader Keir Starmer have even been MPs. So a towering figure on the political stage here and around the UK, but a figure who, despite winning election after election after election, was repeatedly denied the very thing that drives her in politics, that desire for independence, that desire for a referendum. Now, those in the SNP say that that is unjust, but nonetheless, it's a political reality. That, alongside all of the other political problems that were stacking up for her, perhaps meant a harsh decision taken by her in private, concluding that the time was best to go now before potentially things get trickier for the SNP. What's really striking tonight, Hugh, speaking to her political opponents, Conservatives and Labour figures privately, is that they say they are relieved. And expressing that relief, they are paying her the ultimate political compliment, because they are acknowledging that she was a formidable opponent to face. Those who believe in the union of nations of the UK, who oppose Scottish independence, are delighted. They think their cause has been advanced as a result. For Scotland now, a period of soul searching, particularly for members of the SNP, with that awesome responsibility of picking a new First Minister from a very open field. Very few people have a strong view or certainty about which way things will turn out. And Scotland soon to be under new political leadership.
Chris, many thanks once again. Chris Mason there, our political editor here at Holyrood. We'll be back here in Edinburgh just before the end of the programme to look at some of those potential other successors to Nicola Sturgeon. But in the meantime, Sophie, let's join you.